Hello everyone, welcome. Can I encourage you to come a little bit nearer, so we haven't got as much space? Yeah. Not well. You can if you want to. That has happened to me before, once before. Yeah. Yeah. Please do move a little bit closer, just to fill the space a little, please. I know you've sat on your chairs and you're nice and comfy now. How's your day been so far? What do you think? Any takeaways from key aha moments that you found in any of the sessions that you've been to? Anyone want to share as we settle down? No? I feel like Marilyn Monroe with these lights. Okay. Right, we've still got a few more people coming in. Right, we'll get started properly then. Good afternoon and welcome to the last session of day one. It's flown by. I don't know if that's felt the same for you as well. My name's Teresa Rose and I'll be your chair for this session, which is continuous learning. And it's all about moving beyond formal programs to ongoing performance-focused learning. So start with a question for you. Do you think, put your hand up if you think formal learning is enough? No, we're all in the right place. Yes. So the next question is, how do we move beyond formal programs to ongoing performance-focused learning? And that's what our next speakers are going to share with us. So I'd like you to welcome to the stage Michael Edwards and Maya Harris from McKinsey.
Right. Thank you, everyone. And those at the back, do come nearer. Do come nearer if you're at the back, please. Go on. I've got to see someone stand up. There we go. Purely because you'll just hear it a bit better. It'll be a bit higher energy. I can actually see your faces a little bit. I may come down as well and talk to you a bit from in amongst the group. First of all, thank you for inviting us to come and speak. And I know at the end of what I'm sure has been a tiring day, probably with some travel at the start, you're probably all feeling a bit knackered and so on. So this is going to be a bit interactive, and there's going to be a bit of work for you, but purely with the goal to help you just understand some of the concepts that we're thinking about. The reason that we're thinking about this topic is we employ about 45,000 people worldwide. And that means we have people, based on our really rough estimate we did before, we reckon they work about 90 million hours a year. That's if you average about a 50-hour week, and some of our people will do quite a lot more than that, some will do a little bit lower than that. But let's say about 90 million hours a year. And we deliver, we think, about 3.5 million hours of formal learning to people. So the question is, what about all that other time? How do we get the best value out of all that other time? Think in your own organization, the percentage of time that you can get into formal learning versus all the other time someone is sitting there within the organization. And that's what we're talking about today. How can you unlock rapid capability building at scale? How can you really formalize the learning outside of the formal learning structures? Why should we be talking to you about this? I'm Michael Edwards. I lead something called The Way We Work, which literally does what it says on the tin. We haven't come up with a better name yet than that, but if anyone can suggest one, I'd love a better name than that. So I lead that, which is how we get our teams and our people to perform at their best. How do we get the high performers that we recruit to perform at their best? And that's a really hard thing to do. If you can get that last 10% out of really high performers, that's a massive difference in their performance level. That's half my week. I spend the other time in my week leading all of the people functions and operations in the UK, Ireland, and Israel.
And my name is Maya Harris. If you were paying attention, you might have noticed that you were meant to be seeing Heather Stefanski today, our Chief Learning Officer. Sorry to disappoint. So unfortunately, Heather got pulled away with a family emergency. Her husband broke her collarbone yesterday. So she wasn't able to make it and dropped me in instead. So, hi.
Let me give you that.
I am part of Heather's team. I work in our learning function. I design and develop programs for our kind of mid-career consultants, so team leaders and our junior partner group. But I also do a lot of facilitation work for our more junior consultants in leadership development, in sort of diversity and inclusion learning, problem-solving learning, all that kind of stuff. And increasingly, we see the topic we're talking about today creeping into those formal learning moments as well. You're going to see a word that we're going to use a lot, and because we're in the UK, I feel like I have to justify what it is, or explain what it is. We're going to be using the word apprenticeship, apprentice, a lot. We don't mean that in the UK government-sponsored vocational learning for young people way that we tend to interpret that in the UK. This is something different. And to give you a bit of clarity on what that different is, I want you to imagine a situation. I would like you to imagine you're a manager or you're a team member. And the manager comes to the team member and says, I need you to help me make this presentation. The meeting's tomorrow. Who's been in that situation before? A few hands going up? Okay, good. Now, maybe what sounds familiar is that the team member goes away, does some work, sends in the first version of that presentation deck, and the manager looks at it and goes, it's not quite right. Bashes out an email with some suggested changes, sends it back. Team member receives it, tries to do their best to respond to that feedback, and sends a second version back to the manager. Manager's still thinking, it's still not quite right, but it's really getting quite urgent now. I'm going to do it myself. Does that still sound familiar? Right, okay. What's just happened there is we've missed an opportunity for learning. Right? That collision moment of those two people coming together has actually left both feeling pretty dissatisfied. Right? And when we talk about apprenticeship, it's a way to build capabilities at scale of the things that people actually need to do to be able to do their jobs. So throughout the next just over an hour, Michael and I are going to help you understand what we mean by purposeful apprenticeship and why it's so important to the work that we do, but also why it drives impact for organizations who are doing something similar. We're going to do a bit of teaching ourselves to teach you guys what the core apprenticeship skills are, and guess what? You're going to get to practice them. Yay, that's just what you want last thing on day one of a conference. And then towards the end, we'll start talking about how you might leverage apprenticeship in your organizations moving ahead. Another question to you all. Who knows the 70-20-10 model of learning and development? Okay, leave your hands up if you love it. Everyone's hands go down. Okay, good. The reason I asked the question is because we as learning and development professionals, we spend an awful amount of time worrying about the 10%, which is the 3.5 million hours roughly that Michael was talking about for us in McKinsey. Apprenticeship in this form is a way of scaling. It's a way of taking the rest of that 70-20-10 model, the 20% you learn from the people that you work with, and the 70% of what you learn by doing on the job, and you make it impactful. Right? So that's really what we mean by apprenticeship in this case. So how does this play out for McKinsey, and why do we find it important? So the approach that we've taken to this basically follows the 4 steps you see on the screen. We set very clear expectations on skills and skills development. What skills are important for the organization and for our learners to be learning? How much learning should we be doing, and how should that come about? Then it's all about engineering these collision moments. In the past, we could rely pretty much on forces of nature creating those apprenticeship collision moments where I would be staffed on a team with Michael and I would learn from the guru how to do an element of my job. Now, a few things happened for us that meant we had to take a step back and actually design this. And they all happened in the last 5 or so years. In the last 10 years, McKinsey has tripled in size. A lot of that in the last 5 years. Just many more people to try and engineer collision moments for and hope that they happen by chance. Our roles became more diverse. We're more reliant on tech skills talent now than we ever would have been before. And so if Michael doesn't have the skills that I need as a tech person, well, then I'm not going to benefit from a collision moment with Michael. Similarly, the pandemic happened. And suddenly our teams weren't spending 4 days a week with their clients on client sites anymore. They weren't in the same team room for 10 plus hours a day. And suddenly they were communicating through Zoom and through Slack and through email. And so the power of those moments and the frequency within which a moment of true learning would happen became a lot less. So how we staff our teams intentionally and how we set up those collision moments is part of the new design to make sure that we are maximizing the opportunities for this to happen. We're building a culture that says everyone is a learner and everyone is a teacher. In traditional apprenticeship, it's quite hierarchical, right? You would learn from the boss who's been around for 20 years, right? But actually, with the diversity of skills that's growing and growing and growing, the most senior person might not be the right person to learn from. It might be the person sat next to you who's the same level of seniority as you are, who just happens to know something that you don't. So this idea that we remove that hierarchy and we say that everyone is a learner and everyone is a teacher is super important, because it creates many more opportunities rather than relying on those interactions between a manager and a team member. And then it's all about providing the right learning interventions, be that formal learning, be that informal learning. It can be as much as making sure that our teams are going for dinner once a week together, and that is part of the way we work. How are they connecting as teams to make sure there are enough social connections to allow impactful learning? And that all then sums up together for just-in-time development needs. The impact for us has been huge. To give you a couple more statistics, we run a survey where people map their mentors, their sponsors, and the people who are apprenticing them. And anyone who had 7 or more people who were apprenticing them were 2 times more likely to have a higher rating than the average. So they were benefiting, their performance was benefiting by having that wide community of people who were apprenticing them. But also, coming out of the Way We Work program that Michael leads, we could also see that for people who'd been with the company for less than 3 years, that if they were spending 3 days a week with their team, they were 2 times more likely to be satisfied with the level of apprenticeship and development support that they were getting. So not only were they performing better in their ratings, but they were feeling more satisfied as well by focusing on purposeful apprenticeship. It's not just us. The McKinsey Global Institute, our kind of external research arm, have recently published earlier this year a piece of work looking at what we call people and performance winners. There's an awful lot on this page. I'll simplify it. We all know that a performance-focused organization can hit a level of performance. What we also see, and what comes out of the research, is that organizations that focus on people and performance outperform their peers. Right? So this focus on people really matters. And when we look at some of the things that those people and performance winners are doing, this lifelong learning, this every moment is a learning moment ethos keeps on coming through. And when you look at the data of how they're performing, here are some stats for you. 4% lower attrition. So employee turnover is down. 3.6 times more likely to outperform financially their peer companies. Same industry, same size. They're averaging about 74 hours of training, which is pretty good. It's roughly our average as well. 8% better revenue growth through the pandemic. So they were more resilient to a huge economic shock than their peers who were not focusing on both people and performance. So what is purposeful apprenticeship? Well, I'll let you read what's on the screen, but I also want to draw some comparisons. You'll often hear the word mentorship and sponsorship used next to apprenticeship. How are they different? Well, a mentor is someone who gives me advice. I go to them with a problem, and they say, well, maybe you could think about trying this. That's a mentor. A sponsor is someone who creates opportunity for me, someone I have a particularly strong relationship with, who's like, Maya's great, I'm going to pull Maya into this thing, and she's going to kick ass at it, right? And that way, they've created an opportunity for me, and in time, I start creating opportunities for them through my own performance. Whereas an apprenticeship, well, this is me saying, if I'm going to apprentice you, I'm committed to helping you develop the skills that you need to be successful in your job. That's the difference here. It's not just advice, It's me committing to your skills development over time. And what we see is that there's a link between what starts as an apprenticeship type relationship moving all the way through to a sponsorship type relationship. If you have someone who's apprenticing you, it's 10% more likely we see in our data for our internal teams that relationship is going to turn over time from a focus on my skills and development to being my sponsor and creating opportunities. And that in turn is 25% more likely to be sustained over time. So just establishing new relationships with the people that you're working with leads to opportunities further on down the line. And because that's sustained, it keeps on creating development, professional opportunities as you go on over time. I think you've got an example to show, right?
I do. I'm going to demonstrate maybe purposeless apprenticeship. So first of all, if everyone could just stand up, if that's okay. Just stand up. Stand up. And I'd like you to, don't worry, nothing bad's going to happen, but close your eyes. Nothing bad's going to happen, I promise you. Close your eyes and just imagine a desert. A desert. Right? Imagine the sand and the rocky ground. Imagine the feeling of that warm wind, the smell of that dry air, the sound of those little bits of sand and rock going across the desert floor. Just put yourself there in the desert. Now, if there's anyone who really loves deserts, can you put your hand up? You can open your eyes. But okay, you put your hand up first. You're going to come forward, I'm afraid. I promise I'm not going to embarrass you too much. You can sit down again now. But just imagine that desert, because that desert is where I was. Hello, I'm Michael. I'm sorry to picture. I promise it won't be bad. I promise.
You visited the desert in Israel?
Not Israel, but you may be good at this.
Oh,
so
this might be about to backfire.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. I reckon you may have a good go at this. So I was in the desert in 2004. I was in the Sahara doing a trip across the Sahara by bike, which is a really bad idea. I wouldn't recommend it at all. Bikes, deserts, not a really good combination. And I was traveling with a guide, and I had a normal just like hat on. I had a helmet, and then I also had just a baseball hat to wear. But it was so dry and dusty, he insisted that I wear, and this is the actual one actually, he insisted I put a headdress on. You're going to know how to do this, aren't you? Insisted I put a headdress on, but he had to show me how to do it. So he apprenticed me how to do it. And I'm going to show you how to do it, but I'm not going to do anything else. I'm not going to explain how to do it. I'm just going to show it. And if you think that's like a manual skill, what we often think about as apprenticeship, so someone being like a bricklayer, being taught how to be a bricklayer or an engineer or a carpenter or something like that, that's a manual skill, right? So I'm going to demonstrate that manual skill, but then we're going to talk about cognitive skills and how you do that. So that's your one, which I got in Oman last year. But I'm just going to use it. So you might want to just get it out to its full length so you know what you're dealing with. And then I'm not going to say any more now.
Going well so far?
Headdress, that's how you do it. So pretty simple to do, but very hard to do. Look, that's pretty good. Very hard to do if you're not sure. Well done, Iran. But the point is, it's really hard to do, right? If you're just watching someone do it. Thank you, that was terrific.
I live
Thank
like
you.
15 minutes away from Bedouins, so...
you have some apprenticing to do with them. But look, I know that's at one level it's a bit of a ridiculous example, but it's just to make the point that if we're just observing what people do, it's a really inefficient way to learn. But in reality, that's what we do in work the whole time. We have people sitting with us in meetings, junior people who haven't done that before, sitting in meetings just observing what we're doing. And they don't have any way to really learn beyond observing. And the challenge is fine, you could watch that, Aran could do that and see what I was doing, and actually I think did a remarkably good job with like no description, none of the mental model, and I'm going to talk about mental models a bit more. He did a remarkably good job of that. But imagine if that was a cognitive task. He's got nothing to observe, really. All he can observe is just practices and behaviors, and that is only going to reveal the very tip of a very large iceberg of thinking. And that's happening every day. In every meeting you're in, you're watching people thinking, what can I learn from them? I'm watching people, they're watching us. And actually, as I get older in work, what I realize, and it's so easy to forget, is how much the new joiners watch us. All of us who are more experienced, right? How closely they observe what we're doing, and how little we convey about why we do it that way. And we're missing out on huge opportunities. So as a learner, first of all, the way we think about this is you have 3 roles as a learner: to observe, to articulate and act. And Iran was completely hamstrung by me because all he could do was observe. So he got to watch, but he didn't get to ask why. He didn't get me to explain the little knot that I'd put in that made it easy for me to pull it down. I didn't get to explain why I tightened it in a certain way, which I got taught actually by someone really showing and explaining it to me. So the first thing is you need to observe as a learner. And as we said, this is non-hierarchical. We're all learners. My kids can teach me more about ChatGPT than I can teach them, that is for sure, right? So we're all learners. So watching and asking why, then explaining, this is what I think you're doing, this is what I think I'm seeing, this is how I'm thinking about that, and actually sharing that back, and then acting. I've got this, I'm going to try and do it on my own. I'm going to do this on my own, right? So those are the 3 stages of your responsibility as a learner, and there will be times you are all learners. But then as a teacher, everyone is a teacher, and everyone is a learner. Your first thing is to share the model. Let me show you why. Let me show you and tell you why. Let me show you and tell you why I'm doing it in this way. Then the scaffold. This is how I approach problems like this, breaking it down into more detail, maybe giving some of the supporting scaffold. An example of that I heard the other day of a scaffold is there was one of our senior colleagues who's really expert in manufacturing and going into factories and kind of looking at how they operate and so on. There were just too many visits to do. He couldn't do them. He sketched out a little template, talked the people through what he does and why, and then gave them a little template to fill in. Super simple thing, but that was the scaffold for them to help them do the right behavior, to ask the right questions. And of course, we do that. All of us do that in work a bit, but have we really explained the why? Then the coaching. I could have been talking around through how you do it and observing, and critically, the coaching is not you doing, but you stepping back and letting the learner do it, and you're advising them on what's working and what's not working. And then the last bit, the fade. And this is the opportunity for people to amplify their impact. It's the bit about when you can go into the background, and you're no longer having to get to be supervising that person, to be teaching them, because they can now operate independently. And of course, the art can be sometimes to know when to fade in and when to fade out. Who knows Gino D'Acampo, the TV chef? Come on, there must be some, but yes, yeah. So he just said this very simple thing that for me was a clarifying moment. I know it sounds ridiculous, but a clarifying moment in understanding leadership and the role of a teacher. He said, as a chef, you have to know when to be tight and when to be loose. And you have to, and his description was, you've got to be tight at the start with a new chef or at the start of a service. Then you can be loose, and then you need to spot when to be tight again, which might be when you're plating up, for example. And that, I thought, was a lovely little way of thinking about it, when to be tight, when to be loose. But judging that fade is an exquisite art. But if you can fade, if you can go into the background, you no longer have to do that task with that person, and you can focus on someone else. So it's how you amplify your value as a teacher.
Can I take us back to the manager and the team member?
Please do. Yeah, go for it.
So the manager and the team member with the presentation. Imagine if you would. Can we just put the previous page on?
Yeah.
Imagine if you would, instead of taking on and doing it himself, the manager said, hey, look, I think this is a skill you should be able to do. I'm going to commit to spending some time with you to help you develop that skill. And then says, well, okay, let's do the next iteration together. And I'll explain to you how I think about making presentations, how I think about who the audience is and the key messages I need them to hear, how I think about breaking that into a storyline of what's going to be on each page. And provides the scaffold of, well, here's some presentations I've done in the past. Here's some examples you can kind of use to incorporate that behavior, then coaching through that next iteration. And what if it wasn't just that one presentation, but it was something that time and time again, when there was a presentation need, the manager goes to the same team member and says, here's another one, here's another attempt, let's try it again. And continues to coach, continues to scaffold, continues to model. And over time, can start doing this, right? So that really, like, so many of you put your hands up earlier when I said, is this a familiar situation, right? If the manager has apprenticeship in mind, it doesn't turn into a crunch moment of panic where he's like, I just got to take it myself. And the learner is like, oh, I feel like I've done something wrong. And it turns into something that builds skills and skills over time. And I've picked a really simple example of a presentation, but you can apply that to any skill. Yeah. And it's a bit like a more cognitive skill compared to some of the more manual tasks.
Absolutely. And of course, the reason we don't do it, and we say, I'll just do it, is because we don't have time. Yeah? That's why that ends up happening. But the fact is, if you don't break that circle at some point with one individual, you will never have the time to coach another. But if you can fade from one, you will have time for the other person who you really need to spend more time with. You have to break that cycle. And I know that's hard to do, and it might require a lump of work to do that, but you've got to. Now, having said all this, us presenting this to you is a really bad way to apprentice you in it, right? Because that would be completely counter to what we've just described. So we've got an exercise for you to go through to practice teaching and learning, and hopefully by that just get a bit more into what it really means. Now, at the heart of this, if you just pay attention to the left-hand side at the moment, rather than reading the instructions on the right, just look at the left. At the heart of this is mental models. To be a really good teacher, you've got to understand the mental model that you're using to do something. You all have, I mean, just think of the thousands, millions of hours of experience, all the different things that you've seen in this room, in this conference, all of the mental models that you've established by what you've observed working, not working, what you like, what you don't like, who you admire, who you don't respect for how they work, who's taught you things, all the mental models you have on how to do stuff. They're all sitting there in your head. They are invisible. People might observe what you do in a meeting and get a hint of your mental model, but the challenge for you as a teacher is to make the invisible visible to people, to explain it. And to be able to do that, you've got to be able to explain your mental model, the why and the what you do in a cognitive task. So we're going to do this by getting you to think of one. So I'd like you to think of a cognitive task. So that could be designing something, writing a presentation, summarizing notes, managing complex stakeholders. I'm going to give you about a minute to think of it. You're going to need pens and paper, by the way, for this bit, because it's going to go on for a little bit, and you're going to be teaching someone your mental model. Okay? So have a think. Just have a think about what it might be. I'm just going to stay quiet for about a minute and just noodle on what would be a cognitive task that you do, something you have to think about, that you do regularly, that you think could be a good thing for you to map out the mental model for. Got it? Let's give you about another 15 seconds so you can change your mind and think, oh, actually, now I've thought about it, maybe that other thing would be better. Okay. So put your hand up if you've got something in your head, a mental model. Not a mental model, sorry, a task. A task. Who's got a task? Anyone not? All right, there's a few more people. Think harder. Think more. Just something you do regularly, something you have to think about doing regularly. As I said, it could be a design task, planning a meeting, arranging a conference, writing a presentation, doing some problem solving, doing some analytics.
Making a viral Twitter post.
Sorry? Yep, exactly.
I see you.
Exactly.
I see you.
Okay, right, so if you've got your thing in your head now, what I want you to start doing is to think about what your mental model is. Now, what do I mean by that? What are the actual processes, the steps or the tasks that you do? What are the steps or the tasks that you go through for that? And start writing them down. It doesn't matter how you write them down. You might write it as a scattered map of different words. You might write it as a list. You might write it as steps, very clearly numbered. But start writing those down, okay? Okay, Thank you. I need to stand here so that I'm on the camera. So my mental model is I now need to be here, and the why is otherwise I'm not on screen. Okay, so start writing down your mental model. I'm actually going to give you quite a few minutes to do this. So try and write down your mental model. What is the things you do, the process that you go through, the steps that you think through, and why? Because you're going to be explaining these to someone. I'll give you about 5 minutes to do the first bit of this, because we're actually going to go down to another level beyond. Okay, just pause for a moment. Just have a think. How are you feeling about the idea that you'd selected? Is it feeling like the right sort of thing, or do you want to change it to something else? If you do, now's the time to change it. How are you finding writing it down and laying it out? And either change now or keep going with the one you've got. But if you've got steps that you've laid out, try and break them out a little bit further to another level. For each one of those steps, what are the subcomponents of that, and what is the why that you, for those things? Why do you do it like that? It'll be different for every person. You'll have a different mental model, a different kind of intellectual algorithm for each person. As I said, you're going to explain this to someone else in a moment, so they get some learning out of it from your experience. So. Okay, I think we'll call it there. I think that will be enough. So hopefully you've got now written in front of you, or laid out in some way, or in your head, a mental model for a cognitive function you perform often. What you're now going to do is have a little bit of a play at the teaching and learning aspect of this. And if you think about what I said before, as a teacher, the key is to explain that mental model. In fact, the key word as a teacher is because. I do it like this because. And then your key question as a learner is why. Why do you do it like that? Not what do you just do, but why do you do it like that? So what I'd like you to do, if you're sitting next to someone, pick someone sitting next to you. If it's odd numbers near where you are, it's fine. A 3 is fine. But basically, pair up with someone else, and then one of you needs to pick to be the teacher, and one or two of you are going to be the learners. Explain what the cognitive task is, and then talk them through your mental model. And we really mean this as being useful learning, right? We've all got things that we could all teach people in this room that we could share. We've all got things that we can learn from other people in this room. So try and actually get something that will be useful out of it for you personally, a different way of thinking about something you've not thought about. So pair up now, and you're going to have about 5 minutes to teach the other person from when we start. Pair up with someone, and then decide who's going to be the teacher and the learner. The teacher say what the thing is they're going to teach. I think we'll, sorry to interrupt you, because it sounds like there's lots of good discussion going on. I'll get back where the cameraman can see me so I don't get in trouble. Is that good? Great. Okay. I'll let you just finish off. Okay, I'd love someone to tell me something they actually learned, right, that they think is useful and insightful. Someone put their hand up. Or just shout out something you learnt there from the other person. I can see at the back there, I think the person in yellow.
Roaming mic.
Do you want to?
We have a roaming mic.
Right, there's a mic coming over to you so that everyone will be able to hear.
Hello. We talked about booking meetings, and actually one thing that I took on was thinking about what other people want to get from your meeting rather than just you sending out an agenda.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. In fact, that's a different mental model, isn't it? To think, first of all, what's in it for them, not what am I trying to convey. Someone else.
I wish more people.
So I've got someone at the front, the gentleman at the front here.
A lady here as well.
Put your hand up.
Yeah, put your hand up. You actually want to. The lady.
We'll just start. Oh no, we're going to go there, and then we'll go over to the gentleman in the green jacket here. So what
I
did you
learned
learn?
about influencing other people and the actual depth that you can go into to prepare. So it's not just going in with, here's what I want and this is why I want it, but actually considering their background, maybe their culture, their personality, and how you might approach that conversation. And then a key thing as well after is reflecting on how that went, so then you can continue to learn and grow and develop your influencing skills.
That's a great example, great example. And we'll just take one more here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So this is one of those interesting models within a model. Oh,
Yeah.
that's really good. So we were talking about complex change project, wasn't it? And one of the first models in that was stakeholder engagement. But I think there was a really interesting model within that of deliberately always picking people who were sort of, experts or new within the organisation, the traditional stakeholders, but at the same time seeking out people who were new to the organisation and had a different perspective. And just
so why would you seek out the people who are new to the organisation?
It was to understand the sort of, because if you're trying to bring together a change program, is if you're going to change things from how they are, then what might they need to be and how do people see differently? But I'm probably not doing as good a job as explaining it, because it's not my model, but
it's all good.
There we go.
Great, fantastic. Now look, the thing that just struck me, actually in a way surprised me, because I hadn't really thought, as I was rehearsing for this, just what would happen in the room then. But actually there were amazing conversations taking place, and you were all, I don't know whether you all felt it, but that felt like a lot of very engaged discussions, because we all love to learn and we all love to teach. And I hope all of you did get something out of that. You thought, actually, that is interesting. I haven't thought about it like that. And of course, we're just trying to illustrate the point that it doesn't take a huge amount of time to do this. It takes some subtle changes in what you do in your time with people as a teacher and as a learner. And I was just having a conversation with two gentlemen here about how one of the changes I've made from, I think I first presented this a year ago, is if I'm sitting with one of my teams and I'm going through a document, a piece of work they've done, and I'll say, well, actually, I'll do it in a different way, I don't think I'd often say why. I think I'd just say, actually, take the consultant kind of stereotype, if I'd have the boxes in yellow and they'd be on the left and I'd like less words there. I'd just like give a functional description, as opposed to saying, actually, the most important thing that we're trying to get across here is this one thing. And the reason that's really important is you think what they said in the last meeting, and I'm not taking that much longer. I'm adding 2 or 3 sentences. This is not about you taking on, oh my God, with all the other things I've got to do, I've now got to become a teacher and spend like 45 minutes with everyone, and all the meetings have got to be longer because I've got to say why to everything I do. I know that's not possible, but there are multiple opportunities for you to share a little bit of insight, and then there'll be some opportunities where it's worth investing the time to give more detail on the why, to really coach. And there's lots of opportunities for you in a meeting, if something, or in any session with someone, if someone's doing something, to just say, just a moment, can you just explain to me why you did it like that? Because I want to make sure I've really kind of understood it. And then maybe even articulating back as the learner, this is how I'm thinking about it. Have I got that right? Great. Because I can now go away and do that. I'll call on you if I need it, but I may not need to call on you as much. Going back to what we were talking about before, you just think what this unlocks from a learning and development standpoint, if that happens consistently. If that happens consistently. So one of the things I'm doing with the way we work function that I lead across the firm is we're working with 5,000 teams each year. So we're working with a huge number of different teams. We're constantly forming and reforming, breaking up and rebuilding teams. That's the standard in the sort of work that we do. And we're trying to give them some very small number of things that they should do that make a very big difference in performance. And just having regular one-to-ones and regular sessions in a team where you review how the team is performing increases the team's apprenticeship and development, their perception of their apprenticeship and development on that study by 23 percentage points. 23, that's a massive difference by just creating a bit of time to actually talk about how things are working, how am I developing, and the feedback, and giving feedback to people and creating time to do that properly. So, in summary for that, just think to yourself, how do you embed that day to day? How do you embed that day to day? I'm going to come back with a couple of challenges to you on that. As a teacher, how are you going to show your work? As a learner, asking why regularly, and then think of the kind of scaffolds that you could build around that. That could be you having drawn out a mental model. It could be the templates you provide people, the sort of help that you direct them to. Have a think about those things, and we'll come back to exactly what that means a little bit later for you as an organization. But what that means is then purposeful apprenticeship, this overall topic that we're talking about, is about distributing that skill and responsibility for teaching and learning across the organization. And if you make that part of your culture in an organization, that means everyone is doing that. That takes the burden off a much smaller number of people to be the teachers. And there's a lot of people who know that they're a teacher, but there's a lot of people who won't know that they really are, very deliberately, very purposefully, a learner. Making everyone in the organization a learner and a teacher every day. I don't want to paint some utopian picture to say that, oh, of course, we've cracked this completely. It is as hard in our organization to drive cultural change as it will be in yours. And what we're trying to do, though, is to get 45,000 teachers and learners who are doing this every day. That's what we're trying to do. That's our aspiration, but it's a tough thing to do. So,
Okay, so that does sound like a big aspiration, and you're probably thinking about your organizations and how might that work for you. This is not exhaustive, but it's some things to think about what does it take to create an environment where everyone can be a teacher, everyone can be a learner every single day. Part of this is around setting the intentionality of how learners learn. Do they have agency to learn the things that they need to learn rather than being told the things that they should learn? Having a skills-based approach to learning rather than a tenure-based or programmatic-based approach to learning. There's a place here around the intentionality of teaching. So, are you building the right coaching skills? Are you creating a culture where coaching and feedback is happening frequently? Are there incentives in place to encourage people to develop others? We changed our performance model, we call it our leadership development model, to incorporate just this. So this is how every single member of the firm now gets evaluated at the end of every year, or in some cases twice a year. There's an incentive now for being a teacher every day and being a learner every day. But there's one more dimension, which is not so much about the teaching and not so much about the learning. It's about creating a culture of psychological safety, where it's safe for me to go to Michael, hey Michael, I don't know something, can you help? And I'm not worried about how important he is, and I know I'm going to get a positive response back. And this is one of the hardest ones, in my view, to crack, and it's a topic I talk about a lot in diversity inclusion learning, is the ability to create psychological safety, what that means, and some of the tips and tricks that managers and people at all levels in the organization can do to create that culture of safety. I'm going to leave this on the screen a second. You're all already thinking, how much of this is in place for my organization? Where do I feel like we're good? Where do I feel like we've got work to do? I want you to turn to your partners again. I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes. Just have a quick discussion. How ready is your organization? Where have you still got things you need to do that might make reaching this culture of apprenticeship, of everyday learning, a reality? So have a think, have a chat. I'll be back with you in a couple of minutes. Okay. Okay, so I'll give you 30 seconds more. I'm going to ask for a couple of volunteers again, just to reflect on the conversation you just had. What struck you? How ready are your organizations for this? Are you on the right-hand side? Left-hand side of the page, limited readiness against those indicators we had up? More? Anyone want to volunteer some reflections on the conversation you were just having? Hands in the air so we can run a microphone to you. Surely someone. Ah, here we go, at the front. Thank you.
What we have is the ownership is in the individual's hands, in the learner's hands, so you drive your own development, but we don't have this, what you spoke about, of I will be committed to growing your skills. So there's no incentive to teach other people because everyone's trying to prove that they're awesome and that they're learning, but they don't want to share that as much. I mean, there is a spirit of collaboration, but there's also this, it comes back to incentivizing sharing and incentivizing teaching, and I think that's missing. And I'm actually curious about how you're doing that.
And if everyone's trying to prove that they're awesome, does that mean the psychological safety bit's in a good place?
No, it's not at all.
Yeah.
It's missing, but I'm curious about the incentive structure to change that mindset.
Do you want to take that question?
I will do when we go through the
come back to it. Okay.
I'll talk about
Anyone else want to volunteer a reflection based on readiness of your organizations for everyday learning? Oh, one behind you. Here we go.
So in my organization, we've got quite a few of your points, like the coaching network and there is appetite for learning and for teaching. The psychological safety, what I find is there are pockets of it. So the teams are very different. So, there are those who really discuss the mistakes and they learn from it. And there are those who just completely with zero mistakes, which obviously means they just don't learn from them, yeah?
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, how to spread that it becomes a culture.
Sure. And the key word you've chosen there is culture. Okay.
Okay, so picking up on both those points, actually, incentive structures and the sort of culture, the way that we approach change in organizations is through this 4-part framework called the influence model. So we use this on ourselves, but also with our clients. And you can see those little times 3.7, times 4.2, times 2.4. That's, if you do this properly, that quadrant properly, that's how much it increases the likelihood of a successful transformation. So the compound effect of doing all of these things is really significant. That's based on research across genuinely several thousand transformations in organizations. And that's how we've synthesized what are the 4 key things to drive a transformation. So the understanding and conviction is knowing what's required of me. I know actually that I need to be a teacher and a learner. It's part of my expectation. And I understand that that's worth doing, right? So I've been educated why that's worth doing. Giving people the skills, capabilities, and confidence they need, the systems and structures, which could be things like review systems, incentive systems, and role modeling. Role modeling being absolutely key. That's the one that if you don't have it, has the biggest impact. That's what completely destroys your chance of having a transformation. That's one where if you take it away, it actually has the biggest impact. So as it relates to our transformation of becoming a purposeful apprenticeship organization, there's loads on this page. I'll just pick out a couple of things based on what you said. So incentives. It's in the leadership development model for everyone and describes their role as a teacher and a learner at every level. That's also reflected in the upward feedback that they get, which is anonymous, that you can mark that you're happy to speak to the evaluator, but it's an anonymous upward feedback. And then there is peer and senior feedback provided in as well. Our review system is very heavily based on feedback, and you are absolutely celebrated if you are seen as a teacher and a developer of other people. There's also the mentorship, apprenticeship, and sponsorship survey, which we do on an annual basis to look at the health of us as a mentoring, sponsoring, and apprenticing organization. What are the numbers that people have? How does it vary between different locations, different genders, for example? Do we see different amounts of sponsorship and apprenticeship? Because we know that's going to be so fundamental for success. And then we look very hard at the results of that. We have a managing partner who talks about this a lot, along with our other senior leaders. So it is part of that behavior that we see really, really clearly. And it was interesting what you said about the psychological safety in teams. So we have something called the Engagement Team Survey, which goes to every team that's working every 2 weeks. If I would spot a team that responded on some of the scores and indicated to me for the teams that I'm directly responsible for, there would be an intervention on a team where we saw there was what we'd consider to be a kind of a values issue on psychological safety. And then we have a structure set up of team coaches that come in and would work with those teams. Not in a, you're doing things wrong, because that would just further create a lack of psychological safety. But look, the team's not working as effectively as it could. Here's how we're going to help you work. We're going to coach you. We're going to apprentice you in how you run the teams. And that's particularly important because a lot of our team level managers are relatively inexperienced because people move through levels pretty quickly in professional services. So they're often doing it for the first time or the second time and in a very intense environment. You had a question? Maybe
just when we're talking about it, are those roles formalized of, the teachers, the learners, the sponsors, the mentors? No.
No,
Okay.
because
That would
everyone
make
plays
sense,
them in
yeah.
different ways. Everyone plays them in different ways, right? So it isn't a formalized thing. And I always think like sponsoring or being an apprentice, it's a bit like dating. You can't just, it kind of happens naturally. You can't just say, like, we're going out now. It's kind of just got to happen naturally. It becomes apparent who your sponsors are. It becomes apparent who your mentors are, the people who want to give you advice. It is clearly most often from people you've worked with. We know that. And when people come to me and ask, who am I going to learn from or who's going to support me, for me, it's all about investing time with the people that you're working with. And then as a leader, your role in apprenticing, sponsoring people, picking who you're going to sponsor and being deliberate about that. Probably actually the area I work hardest on that is the reverse of it again. One of our values is sustaining a caring meritocracy. That doesn't mean soft, that means being honest with people. There is nothing crueler that you can do than pretending you're sponsoring someone and supporting them an apprentice and not actually supporting them. So what I try and flush out is where there isn't real sponsorship, so someone can know that they will be able to be successful elsewhere, but not here. This person is not supporting them. So it kind of goes both ways. Sorry, that's a little sidebar, but I think it's a really important one on the culture that we try and build. And of course, we don't always succeed. I don't want to say that we're doing everything perfectly. We do not always succeed on that. That's what we're aspiring to. But have a look at that, and then the challenge to you all then, to end on, nearly end on, there's just a couple other things we're going to share, is how do you begin moving your organization towards an apprenticeship culture? But when I say your organization, I'd like you to think about that at a couple of different levels. There's like your organization, like I work in an organization of 45,000 people. I can't get my head around that. There's the bit I work with, the people I work with day to day, the people I see. So yes, if you're in a role where you can influence the whole organization, absolutely think, how can you create more of a purposeful apprenticeship culture in your organization? How can you do that? But also, what are you going to do day to day with the people you work with to be a teacher and a learner? What could the most junior person in the team teach you that you don't know about? I mean, that is a great moment of building trust with that person, making them feel safe, asking them for advice and to explain why. What could they teach you about? What's the mental models that you're going to share with people? Where are you going to explain why? What are those 2 sentences you're going to add in to say, could you do this differently? And here's why I do it like that. Because you won't have to next time. You'll save yourself time and you'll be able to amplify your impact. That's my challenge to all of you.
Okay.
So, to finish up.
I'm going to put one slide on the screen, and then I'm going to let you guys take pictures of it as you wish. There's more resources to come. If you want to find out more about our views on apprenticeship, stuff that we've published, both podcasts from our Learning, Design and Research Centre, articles we've written, it's all here. I'm conscious Mike and I have been horrible at timekeeping, and so I do want to also give you a few minutes to ask any questions that you might have. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen for now, but also throw the opportunity out to you to throw your arm in the air if you've got a question that you want to ask us.
And the photos of my trip to SAR are available on Facebook. But I look a lot younger. It was 20 years ago.
Yeah, question down at the front.
Hi, I guess you said you're aiming for perfection, but not quite there yet. So what lessons have you learned on the way about developing this apprenticeship culture?
Probably that the hardest thing is not the role modeling at the very top, but the next levels down because of pure busyness. That's probably the hardest thing. And on all the change that we're trying to drive at the moment, including the other stuff around the way we work, I feel that's the hardest group to change. And there's a little bit of me sometimes thinks, yeah, I'm not going to worry too much about them. And I'll look at the next tier of leadership that's coming through, because we have regular generational change. It's just in the model, that's an advantage in a way that you kind of can train the next tier of people who are more receptive and are not set in their ways. That's probably been the hardest thing. The other thing then I'd say for the middle tier, so our kind of project manager level people, is how much they've liked the model. How much it gives them confidence in what they can teach, and actually getting people to think about the mental models and kind of to go, oh, Jesus, I do actually know a lot. Right? We all know so much. There was great discussions there where you were unpicking the stuff that you know. That's been really interesting, I think, to see, because people haven't really seen that as their role, and they're thinking, wow, I've been here 5 years working really hard. I actually know loads now. That's been really good. So a tough bit and a good bit.
Have you had any challenges around the stigma of the word apprenticeship? It's often more junior people or younger people, and actually that's not the case. It's across all levels of seniority. So how do you make it top down, bottom up, so everyone's continuing to learn and grow?
I kind of feel like this is a kind of a bit of a UK thing, linked to that clarification I made right at the start of this hour about we're not here to talk about government-sponsored training for young people. For us as a global firm, that's not been the biggest challenge, but I think it's all about the combination of those factors on the influence model you see, which is if you're getting the role modeling right and you're calling it apprenticeship, if you're having the right understanding and conviction that we should all be a learner, we should all be a teacher every day, it starts to make sense in ways that each of us can understand. So part of it is like the intentionality of how you design that transformation in to exactly avoid people going, oh, but this means that. It's like, well, no, it actually means so much more and so much more nuance and something that's so much more powerful.
But it comes back to the point you said earlier about understanding cultural difference. Yeah. So the UK, we've had to explain that more in. It's just different. People have a different view of what apprenticeship is in the UK. It's more a hierarchical relationship as opposed to it being non-hierarchical.
And usually with an apprenticeship, there's a qualification at the end of it, but that's not the case with this then.
No. So the question there is, in apprenticeship, there'll be a qualification at the end, and there's not a case for this. No, because it's ongoing, right? It doesn't stop. We're all apprenticing the whole time, right? We're all teachers and all learners the whole time. There's a question here, was it? And then there's another one there.
When you are talking about the influence model, like the role modeling, you said that we can work to have a better performance of 4 times the one slide. Yes, role modeling. We have 4 times better influence that we can create a better transformative in the organization. How can we measure this kind of number, and we can have some kind of access of the information of the companies that you use to create this kind of report? I never seen nothing from McKinsey that has this kind of information.
Yeah, so this is relatively, come to me after, this is relatively widely published, I think, because I presented some of the other sub-data for like different structures and different industries in quite a lot of different sessions. So I'll speak to you after, but it's research that we do from something called the Organizational Health Index, and we use that to do very large-scale research on organizational change and organizational health. That's what the basis of it is. And that's why it's across thousands of different transformations. And then you're looking at the success of the transformation and the different behaviors exhibited. It's a tricky thing to do. There's a specialist team that run all of that.
Hi, I've got so many questions, but just one. Has this significantly changed the way your L&D departments work?
That's a good question. It's interesting, there's an integration that is still kind of ongoing in that space. So, for example, some of the learning programs that I lead for our junior consultants, we're now incorporating some of what you've seen today in terms of teaching what purpose for the apprenticeship is and how it works and how people can be teachers and learners all the time. And so for me, that's where the intersection sits. On a broad scale, this is about a culture. But how do we bring that to life? Well, when we do have formal learning moments, which will be led by Heather's organization with people like me creating those experiences, there's an opportunity to reinforce. And for me, that's how they overlap.
I think we're probably at time.
Yeah, we probably are. Thank you, Michael. Really superb session and so much practical and pragmatic, useful tools there. And the word for me is experimentation. I think to take away from that is go out there, try things out and gather your own evidence. So thank you. Give them a...